Okay, this week we're going to be looking at some questions that are really heartfelt questions that we all have. Who is God, and why does it even matter who God is? Why is that an important question? But you know, what you believe about God will actually determine your relationship with God. It will determine your relationship with your friends and your family, with strangers, with the people in your church, the people in your community. So it's a really important question to ask and to answer honestly. A lot of people say, well, sure, I believe in God, but do you believe in God, or do you believe in a God that has been formed out of man's imaginations? So do you believe God is basically good, or do you believe God is always good? Because there's a difference. Do you believe he's involved in the lives of people, that he interacts with us on a regular basis, or is he distant and uncaring? There are many different beliefs about who God is, what God does, what kind of character he has. How do we know which one is right? Well, when I want to get to know a person, I spend time with them. That's the best way I know to really get to know who they are and to know their character. I look at their history. I look at how they relate and interact with their family, with their friends, with their coworkers, if that's possible. I look at what they are like when they're alone, when it's just the two of us talking. I look at what they're like in a crowd of strangers. I want to see what their character is, and I can't base that just only on what they say, right? It doesn't make any sense. But with God, how do we do that? We actually can do the same thing with God. We can look at his interactions with man throughout history and discover so much about him. We can read the Bible and see what he says about himself. And with God, we can know that it's true. We can trust in him to say the right things about himself. But he doesn't only leave us with just his testimony about himself. He gives us the testimony of men and women from the beginning of creation, even now and today in modern life. We can look at people who have seen and experienced and are growing and knowing who God is. So we can look at evidence all around us and in our own lives, and we can learn about God. It's interesting, the historical and biblical accounts of men and women who have encountered God are vast. We have them in the Bible. We have them in history texts written down by historians from years ago, thousands of years ago. There were historians writing down the testimony of people that knew Jesus or that encountered God and what his character was like. There are stories that are beyond our understanding. Some have been lost to time, but there are so many stories that we could look at. And for me, the main source of all the stories is going to be in the Bible, the biblical accounts of men and women who encountered God. These stories are written down as a testament to who God is. In Genesis, we see God as a creator. We see him create everything from nothing. We read how he shaped us and he breathed life into us, making men and women different than every other living thing. Everything had life, but only humans had God's breath breathed into them. In Exodus, we see that he's a deliverer. He delivers the people out of the land of Egypt. We see that he's a provider. He provides shoes and clothes and food, water for people in the desert, in the wilderness. He's also the lawgiver. He gives a law that establishes a plan of how people are supposed to live together and interact with one another, both your neighbors and your family and strangers who come into your land, and also how we're supposed to interact with God and worship him. Story after story, book after book in the Old Testament, we hear people declaring the goodness and the righteousness of God. Sometimes we hear it after a tragedy. We see that David had an affair and a child was lost because of that. And we see him crying out to God and telling us, God, you are still a merciful God. That's amazing. That tells me that he knew something about God that maybe I might be missing. We see the story of Job. In one day, he lost his children. He lost his livelihood. He had no means of providing for his family. His livestock was gone. Everything was gone. And not only that, but he lost his standing in the community, his health. Even his friends and his wife lost confidence in him. And yet Job says in Job 10, chapter 10, verses 11 and 12, you clothe me with skin and flesh. You knit me together with bones and sinews. You have granted me life and steadfast love. Your care has preserved my spirit. What? I mean, how does a person know God that way? To experience so much loss and to still say, your care preserves me, your love is steadfast and unfailing. That's the God that I want you to really know and to dig into the scriptures and find this week. So as you're reading this week, every day you're going to have an opportunity to learn a different characteristic about God. And we're going to be talking about that, and you can ask your questions online. And I would love to just share with you and hear what you are learning from the Bible readings that you're doing this week.